Okay, I can sit here. Oh, so that's some potato skin. A nice like you brought it up. Yeah. Good thing you did. How wouldn't you this now?
Already, I have a lot of things I'm already like relations. I have a friend that so there were, I didn't know when I know they go just well, really wanting to start with signature money.
Very well.
I thought I was basically climbing ones, it was going to get a structure or but now they send out runners and I told them it's not even been through.
Well, it's kind of 1 o'clock, so I got a meeting order.
Because I keep reading about how.
Thank you all for coming out and braving the weather. It's coming later this afternoon. It's beautiful now, but you never know in these places. Everybody, turn off your cell phone, please. You always think it's not going to rain, but somebody always does. Now, how many people are here for the first time? Look at that. That is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for holding it. Yes, we love to have you. We're open to our guests, members, non-members, the public. Just love to have you all here. That's great. Now, we're going to start right off with election of officers. And unfortunately, the chair of our nominating committee is on jury duty today. So she doesn't have a report, but she sent one, which I will read. The 2024 nominating committee of the Mangrove chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society offers the following slate of officer nominees for 2024. For president, Ava Lassiter. Raise your hand. For secretary, Kristen Hoffschmidt, who cannot be here because her dad's in the hospital with COVID, and for treasurer, Alicia Irvin. Respectfully submitted, Bruce Ward, committee chair, Ava Lassiter, and Jerry Marcuson, committee members. Now, I need to open the floor to nominations from the floor. You must have the consent of whoever you nominate to serve, so you can't just like nominate your best friend if you haven't talked to him. Are there any nominations for president?
Linda Mann.
Sorry, I turned out.
What did I regret?
Hearing none, I'll close the nominations for president. Are there nominations for secretary? Hearing none, I close nominations for secretary. Are there nominations for treasurer? Hearing none, I close nominations for treasurer. Because we have only one nominee for each position, we can vote on them as a slate. Now, keep in mind that you do have to be a member to vote. So, all of those in favor of adopting the slate proposed by the nominating committee, which is Ava Lassiter, Kristen Hoffschmidt, and Alicia Irvin, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those opposed to adopting this slate? Great, the ayes have it, and we now have new officers. They will take office at the close of this meeting, and we'll have a little passing and gavel, so on and so forth at that time. Now, announcements. This is great. People for Trees, which is a Northport organization that has been in existence for 15 or 20 or 25 years, is giving away 200 Florida elm trees on Friday, January 19th, from 5 to 6 p.m. only, 1 hour only, on Northport City Center Green. Where is that? Northport City Center Green. You have to find City Hall, and it's just like, half a block from City Hall. And I imagine there will be lots of people in line, but this is your chance to get a native Florida tree. We know Alice White, who is in charge of People for Trees. She's currently mayor of Northport, has served on the city council, and has spoken to us once or twice. So we strongly encourage you to go up and pick up a Florida elm and put a native tree in your yard. The second announcement is Plant Native Day. Now, you've all heard me talk about Plant Native Day. I think I started at least in January, if not in December. We have a lot of people who have volunteered, and that is wonderful, but we can always use more. The places to sign up, there are 2 clipboards right back there, and you can put your name there, and if you don't care where, just if you want to volunteer where we need you most, just write anywhere or whatever. Be sure you include your phone number and your email, and we will get in contact. And Bobby, hold your hand up, is in charge of our volunteers for Plant Native Day, and she will contact you and get you placed somewhere where you will be useful. Oh, you get to wear stylish little fluorescent green vests so that everybody can identify you as somebody who can help them.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can you talk a little louder? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I realize I have a problem, but just a little louder.
Okay. Plant Native Day is Saturday, March 9th, from 9 to noon only, and it's right here at Lemon Bay Park. All of the plants will be over there. Our native plant, our member-grown plants will be in the, what do they call it, pavilion. We will have trees and shrubs and some other plants from the Florida Native Plant Nursery in Sarasota. They will be in that same area. We have invited 9 or 10 other nature organizations, including both Charlotte County Parks and Sarasota County Parks, the Audubon Society, the Wildlife, Peace River Wildlife, and so on and so forth. So there will be tents with information tables and literature, and the wildlife people usually bring animals, and they're so much fun. They have owls, and they've brought baby possums, and cute stuff. Laurel Schiller, who is co-owner of Florida Native Plant Nursery, will again give a talk for us. She is going to talk about, the title is Plant for Them, Birds, Bees, Butterflies, and Beneficial Bugs. And she told me that the focus of this is to plant for the creatures. She said some people, want to buy a hibiscus because they like the big red flowers. However, that does nothing for our wildlife. So instead, buy a firebush that has bright red flowers, and it attracts pollinators and birds, and so plant for them. We will have a guided tour of the Lemon Bay Park Pollinator Garden, which is out here, and that will be led by Laura. And she will be there to answer questions. We also have laminated maps that you can use for a self-guided tour, and then you have to turn them back in though. We will have a guided walk of, I think, the pine flatwoods here in Lemon Bay Park. I think Charlie's gonna do that.
Well,
That's Charlie, the guy saying what?
He didn't confirm yet.
I'm sorry, what am I doing? A walk.
A walk.
A walk here?
Okay, maybe he didn't know about that yet.
A walk here on Native Day.
Yeah.
What time?
We'll talk.
Talk about it. Okay, and anyway, it's gonna be an absolutely great day. You will go home with native plants and wildflowers and trees and shrubs, and you can, start converting your yard to Florida natives. Now, coming events on the bottom of the calendar, or bottom of the agenda, there are all our walks for this month. That is, even all the walks up until our next meeting. So there are lots of walks there. Everybody is welcome, unless you're sick and you can't bring your dog. But please come to any of our walks. We have lots and lots of them anymore. They're guided by trained individuals who can really help you learn about the native plants of Florida. Oh, let's see now. Oh, two important dates, of course, Plant Native Day, March 9th, which I just talked about, and also our next chapter meeting, which is on February 13th. The topic is Plant ID, the Big Four, and it's presented by James Stevenson, who is affiliated with Brooker Creek Preserve on the ways north of here. Now, are there any questions about any of that I just rambled through those meetings? Pardon me? Oh, now, as it turns out, I told you Ruth has jury duty. Well, she also is our program chair, and she would normally have introduced our program. So this is kind of a one-woman show today. Our speaker is Dr. Mary Davis. Dr. Mary Davis has lived and worked in Florida and southeastern United States most of her life. She earned her bachelor's degree in botany and master's degree in fire ecology from Florida State University. She earned her PhD in wetland ecology from the University of Florida. Throughout her career as an ecologist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, National Wildlife Federation, and the Nature Conservancy, she applied ecological principles to the conservation and restoration of riverine, wetland, and forested habitats. Recently retired to her childhood home in Venice, Mary has become involved with the local conservation community. Mary hopes to share her expertise with others who are working to enjoy and protect the plants, animals, and places she calls home. Mary, and after the program, please stick around and check out the books that we have available and read the literature and so on. Thank you.
I'm glad to say we're not gonna have to miss Linda. She's still gonna be around, but she has done such an outstanding job. I think the new officers have got their work cut out for them. Their standards high. All right, so I want to start out with a apology, explanation. I have been sick the past month with one flu or COVID or one thing or another, but I've got a presentation together, but if you're gonna have to excuse me, I'm gonna read most of it, just simply because that's as far as I got. So I hope to give you some information that you can use to understand some of the work that we do here at the Florida Native Plant Society in a little more depth. And so, in particular, I'll be talking to you about some ecological concepts like ecosystems and a study of an area of ecological study called island biogeography that helps us understand how we can mitigate the effects of development and habitat fragmentation in Southwest Florida. We're all pretty much familiar with how things have changed in our landscape. Once there were broad expanses of forest and native plants, we now live in an area that's not recognizable as anything resembling a natural habitat. We've lost the natural goods and services provided by that landscape. For example, the impervious surface of parking lots, roads, and our rooftops don't allow water to soak into the ground. Instead, the water runs off and goes down the drains, straight into our streams and rivers and our waterways. The nutrients and pollution and other problems impair our waterways and lead to significant problems that are worsening, like red tide. The frequency and duration of the red tide are getting worse. And although our residential neighborhoods look very nice with the green yards that are so trimmed and the plants that we don't recognize from around here, they aren't habitat. They don't support anything other than the tolerant species like squirrels and pigeons. So our natural ecosystems have become fragmented, and we must try to save what's left. So I think that many of us in the room have the general ecological concepts of what all this is, but I thought it'd be helpful to go into a little more depth about some of these terms that we hear so much about. So you may have heard much of what I'm going to present today, but I hope to give you a little different perspective on the value of our efforts. I'll spend most of my time talking about ecosystems in our region and how they've changed over time, what this means in terms of the goods and services they provide, and give you something. I doubt many of you have heard about island biogeography, so that's going to be a little new twist. And then I'll talk about the state and federal efforts in our area to mitigate the fragmentation in Florida from all this development. And last, I want to talk about being strategic with our actions in our own landscapes and beyond to be more effective in our around our homes and yards. So the basis of my talk today is an ecological concept called ecosystems. As I'll use the term today, an ecosystem is defined as a community of interacting organisms with their environment, and it functions as an ecological unit. Ecosystems is a useful concept for studying and understanding how things interact. As this schematic represents, we can identify different components of an ecosystem. They're usually something that we can see and we can measure. And the they interact with each other. So the arrows represent a flow of energy or materials between these components, and the arrows indicate the direction of flow. All the components interact with each other and they're in balance. If you change a component, like remove the plants or remove the water, it changes the ecosystem and the functions. The circle around all these components defines the ecosystem. It can be anything on a scale from the globe to your yard. It just sets the boundaries on something we can recognize and study. It's truly a concept that people have developed. So when I say something about an ecosystem, I'm referring to more than just the plants and animals. I'm referring to a functioning unit that has developed over time. When we apply the concept of ecosystems to the landscape around us, we define ecoregions. Ecoregions denote areas of general similarity in ecosystems. It's an ecological concept that landform, such as wetlands and uplands, climate, such as rainfall and temperature, soil, such as texture and nutrients, determine what plant species are native to the area. This is in contrast to the agricultural or horticultural term planting zone. Planting zone just defines an area of frost dates in which a plant will grow. Your planting zone if you're planting your vegetable garden and that sort of thing. Frost dates are certainly part of ecosystems, but only a part. So ecoregions can be defined on a number of scales, from continental to very local. The levels 3 and 4 ecoregions shown in this map are the commonly used scales that ecologists talk about as easily recognized in the landscape. The southwestern Florida flatwood is the ecoregion we're in here. Ecoregions to the north, from a rough latitude equal to Orlando, north of there, they are colder and more temperate in nature. Ecoregions south of us, from about Naples south, are wetter and more tropical in nature. And on our eastern side is the Florida Central Ridge. And it's wet and drier, it's higher and more well-drained. So as you drive through the state, you can see the changes in ecosystems by the changes in dominant vegetation. The native plants you select for your yards and the conditions where you plant them are guided in our area by the plant communities of this region. These include pine flatwoods, scrubby flatwoods, palm and oak hammocks, wet and dry prairies, forested wetlands. This is a cypress dome. You don't see too many of those in this landscape, but further north here, this is the Niagara River State Park. They're a topic for another talk, I think. I love cypress domes, and our coastal wetlands. These plant communities occur in a mosaic in the landscape because the land in this area is very flat and has very subtle changes in elevation and water and soils. These plant communities reflect these subtle differences. This illustrates how the ecosystem components subtly interact to produce the characteristic plant communities as well as the associated wildlife. We want to keep our native ecosystems in good shape because they provide goods and services that we call ecosystem functions. We benefit, for example, from the clean water that is stored after it's processed by an ecosystem, the water quality, it's filtered, it's improved. Plants provide oxygen and moderate the temperature with shade. We benefit from the medicine and food we get from the animals that live here and the habitat that's provided by the ecosystem. And we benefit from the pollination, from the pollinators that naturally live here in a healthy ecosystem. So as I said before, when the ecosystem components or the interactions are changed, the ecosystem changes. We see all sorts of disturbances every day that alter how our Southwest Florida flatwoods should function. We pay for lost ecosystem services when the ecosystem is disturbed and cannot function. So ecosystems need to be protected from disturbances that fragments them into smaller, non-functional areas. So there's a lot of ways our landscape has been fragmented. You may be surprised to see fire suppression listed as a form of fire of disturbance. Well, our pine flatwoods and other communities are adapted to frequent fire. And if you suppress it, the plants change. The woody plants grow up, they shade out the once abundant herbs and grasses that were native and natural in our ecosystem. So when fire was suppressed in the early 1900s, it allowed the pine flatwood and scrubby flatwoods to change nature. And so they provide different habitat now. And the different types of disturbances have their own nuances, like power lines, roads, are linear disturbances that sever large areas into small patches. Some animals can fly across them, but many of the smaller animals will not cross them. This effectively breaks large functioning populations into smaller populations that may not be viable if all of their habitat needs are not within their patch. For example, small amphibians will not cross fire lines, let alone roads. If there are no wetlands inside their patch for breeding, the amphibians will eventually die out in that patch. And commercial development is the most intense of these types of fragmentation because everything is removed. All the components of the ecosystem are altered. There's no natural functions left. It's a complete removal and irreversible. Okay, now I hope you can see this. This is an aerial photograph, a composite of aerial photographs of Sarasota County in 1948. The county is generally undeveloped, most of the area was used for pasture. The city of Venice has been established. You can see the cross of the airport. Lemon Bay is down here. The city of Sarasota is up here. The Myakka River comes down here and empties into Charlotte Harbor. You can see the matrix of plant communities in the Southwest Florida flatwood ecoregion. What jumps out at me is the thousands of small lakes on this landscape. Each one of those dark dots is a lake holding water. As you might guess from our discussion of ecosystems, that the filling and draining of these wetlands and lakes has led to changes in the ecosystem functions, like water storage. We have much less water available than we used to. I've always thought it was interesting that Dr. Howard Odom, a University of Florida emeritus professor who's considered the father of ecosystem ecology, suggested that with less water on the land, there was a less evaporation and moisture in the air. Moisture holds heat. He thought that with less heat holding capacity in the atmosphere, that freezes were allowed to move further south, and that's what killed the orange groves, or the orange trees. This may have been the original climate change in Florida. What's happened to our natural habitats that were here when the area was settled? I'm going to show you a time series of aerial photos of Sarasota County that show there was nearly 100% of natural vegetation at the turn of the century. The majority of the area probably still burned naturally from lightning strikes into the early 1900s. However, by the time of this photo in the 1940s, fire had been suppressed for decades, We already had changed things. As I described, the vegetation responded to the lack of fire. But there's still free-range cattle in the interior, low densities. Natural vegetation still dominated, but it was now dominated by woody rather than grasses. And development was in limited areas along the coast. Notice that the developed areas were small and widely spaced. They had minimal impact on the movements of wildlife of all sorts. Areas of development acted like small islands surrounded by a sea of natural habitat. Dispersal of wildlife had few artificial barriers. This one's a little harder to see, the best I could get. In 1974, Sarasota County had a population of about 125,000 people. Most of the development was still along the coast, but Northport was beginning to make areas into the interior portion of the county. Most of the development, however, was still along the coast, still a fairly narrow band along the coast. I-75 was soon to be built south of Tampa. As development increased over time, the natural habitat became more fragmented. The eastern portion of the county was still largely used as pasture, but it was becoming more fragmented by roads, power lines, and other infrastructure. Fire suppression was recognized as a problem by this time, but the land managers had difficulty safely burning the heavy fuels that had accumulated in the shrubby, woody areas. And this was the era just before the Clean Water Act was enacted. Development in a wetland would soon be restricted. There was extensive, in anticipation of limited possibilities of impacting wetlands, there was extensive ditching and draining of areas throughout the county to make the land more useful. Many of those small ponds and lakes are gone by this time, or much diminished. The natural habitats along the coast became islands surrounded by areas of development. Now dispersal has large artificial barriers to movement. Homeowners replace native plants with the horticultural species they are sold by a growing landscaping industry, and the natural structures of trees, shrubs, and ground covers change. Animals have to go long distances across inhospitable terrain to find suitable habitat as fragmentation increases. And here's the last of the series. This is fairly recent. In 2022, Sarasota County had about 450,000 people. Remember, it was 125 50 years before. And there's an additional seasonal population of about 100,000. Development has spread inland far beyond the I-75 corridor. There's I-75, and it's all in here, development's here, all of it here and around. Niagara River is still protected there. Any natural areas on the coast are small preserves, parks, or other protected areas. These natural areas on the coast are particularly important as migratory songbirds and other animals make first landing after crossing the Gulf here. So this is a comparison of development in 2010 with projected development in 2070. The red is development, the green are conserved areas, and the white is other land uses other than development. So you can see that by 2070, certainly within the lifetimes of our kids or grandkids, the Central Ridge is going to be fairly well developed, and it's going to be much denser along the coast and more towards the interior. So this projection of development in South Florida shows how bad the problem's likely to get. So what can we do about it? what I wanted to do is review the ecological consequences of this development and the area ecological study called Island Biogeography. This schematic represents a fragmented landscape that was once covered with naturally functioning ecosystems. The green areas represent remaining natural areas, so this and these lighter greens. The source population is a large protected area that still has all its functions. It serves as the main place from where plants and animals move into the surrounding landscape. The green ovals are areas of different sizes and different distances from the source populations. They still have partial ecological functions. The area between the green areas does not function ecologically and serves as a barrier to movement of plants and animals. This landscape is fragmented. As development progresses, it further fragments the landscape and results in even smaller areas of functional ecosystems. These areas are scattered across the landscape and can be long distances from large, intact areas of functional ecosystems. Many functions are lost, and we lose the biological functions when we fragment wildlife habitat and create barriers to animal movement. So it's useful to understand why animals move across the landscape. There are three basic reasons. One, they forage for food, nesting materials, maybe mates. These are usually short distances of dispersal and are probably the most common reason we see animals moving outside. They migrate. This is a cyclic movement of animal populations between habitats that satisfy different needs of their life cycle, such as between breeding habitat and overwintering habitat. It's timed with resource availability, and the animals tend to move as populations rather than just individuals. And animals move across the landscape to disperse. This is to find new territory, such as these winged ants are, the queens are about to go off and find a new place for a new ant colony. And they can also move away from aggressive individuals or to areas of more resources. I used pictures of insects here to illustrate animals move, but most animals move for at least one of these reasons. If animals have to move away from natural habitats and cross inhospitable habitats to find resources, they are at risk. This phenomenon of animals moving to find suitable habitat is an area of ecological study called island biogeography. This explains in part why islands of different sizes and distances from mainlands or source populations have different numbers of species. One of the concepts of island biogeography is that animals dispersing from the source population is more likely to find a large island that is nearby than a small island that is far away. These blue arrows denote animals dispersing across the landscape. They're just more likely to intercept something large and close than they are small and far away. There are lots of factors involved here, such as how big and strong an animal is, that they can disperse across inhospitable areas, like the ocean, before succumbing. If landfall is made, animals have a better chance of survival on large islands than small islands. There's a better likelihood of finding suitable habitat on a large island and less competition for limited resources. This results in more species on nearby large islands. This concept is useful for looking at fragmented landscapes where remaining habitat is like islands surrounded by inhospitable habitat. Applying this to our Southwest Florida landscape, our parks and preserves are like islands surrounded by developed areas. Animals moving across the landscape to forage, migrate, or disperse are at risk as they try to find good habitat. The sea is made inhospitable by many causes, such as loss of native plants, little water, presence of many toxins, particularly pesticides targeted at insects, weeds, rodents, and other undesirables in a developed landscape. As animals move across the developed areas, they're at risk for death for any number of reasons. So island biogeography tells us that we need to protect as many large areas of natural ecosystems as we can, particularly areas where plants and animals are likely to find habitat to meet their needs. Preferably, these are permanently protected with management plans and resources dedicated to their management. This usually involves government ownership at the county, state, or federal level. As land development increases then, public land ownership becomes the best way to permanently protect native habitats. We're fortunate to have some large protected areas in Southwest Florida. Here in Sarasota County, for example, we have some very large areas. The Mayaca River State Park is probably at least 40 square miles or more. It protects the headwaters of the Mayaca River. The Carlton Reserve is 38 square miles, just east of Sarasota, east of North Venice. It protects much of our water supply. And then there are some numerous smaller parcels that protect the rest of the Mayaca River watershed as it empties into the harbor. And then notice there's lots of other little parks and preserves that dot the western side of the county, but they're very small and act like islands within the developed areas. Sarasota County has more than 50% of our area protected. This table shows the protected area within counties of Southwest Florida. You can see that Charlotte County has 46% protected. That's pretty good in our area. The more coastal areas tend to have higher amounts protected, like Lee and Manatee. The interior counties have less area protected. I think it's because there's less development pressure on them. They don't have, the interior counties don't have the funds to buy land and protect it. And it's mostly agricultural. It's in use, and it still has some ecological value. But buying land is expensive. There needs to be a strategy to protect land that will be most effective in protecting land. So island biogeography tells us that buying and protecting land between islands of isolated habitat is going to be will provide corridors for safer passage. Less land needs to be protected that's more strategically located. So barriers to passage can be better addressed in these more limited areas. So you hear about, if there's roads and things crossing these corridor areas, you hear about wildlife passages and that sort of thing that they can put in place to help the animals move more effectively. So you probably heard about Florida's program for protecting wildlife corridors. The Florida Wildlife Corridor is a statewide network of nearly 18 million acres of connected land and waters supporting wildlife and people. This is according to the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation. The Florida Wildlife Corridor Act was only signed into law in 2021, but this only formalizes 20 years of land protection that the state has been undertaking. The design of the corridors is inspired by movement of large animals like black bear and panthers, but will serve many other species as well. The network is envisioned as a combination of wilderness and working lands crucial to the survival of many of Florida's 131 imperiled animals. This map shows in dark green the areas that are already conserved, and light green are what they're calling opportunity areas that still need to be purchased or protected in some way. Two state agencies are tasked with developing the wildlife corridor. The Florida Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, has identified priority lands to purchase as fee simple under the Florida Forever projects. They're in the lighter pink or lighter purple colors throughout the state. The Florida Department of Agriculture has identified working lands like farms and ranches and forests to purchase conservation easements, the development rights using conservation easements. So a conservation easement limits what a farmer can do with their land for, in exchange for payment and probably tax relief, in exchange for keeping that land open and under agricultural use for 99 years. The Wildlife Corridor program has been successful. The legislature has committed to funding the purchase of 120,000 acres since the act was passed in 2021, but there's much work to be done. The good news for us is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has identified Southwest Florida for more focused efforts to protect, as we're under the most intense development pressure in the state, if not in the southeastern United States. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is about to enact a new conservation program called the Everglades to Gulf Conservation Area. It's denoted by the black line, and it spans 12 counties west of Lake Okeechobee, from Lakeland to Naples, and it includes the watersheds of the Peace River, Myakka River, Fish-Eating Creek, and Caloosahatchee River. The Fish and Wildlife Service has identified this area for fee simple purchase of conservation lands, as well as conservation easements for development rights on working lands, similar to the two state programs. But this will bring federal funds to the need. The proposed area will protect species and improve their resiliency in the face of climate change and extreme development pressure. So they've identified priority lands, let's see, in the dark green for fee simple purchase and the conservation easements. But if you look closely, you'll notice that this program is going to focus on lands that are more interior, that are east of the I-75 corridor, and that leaves the coastal areas where most of us are out of the program. Out of the picture, so to speak. Well, so let's just review for a minute that what does this mean if we want to counter the effects of fragmentation? From the island biogeography point of view, there are several things to consider. We want to preserve large intact areas that still function as ecosystems. They should be large enough, for example, to have natural fire and hydrologic regimes, to keep the native plant communities in balance and supportive of native wildlife. And much of our native wildlife is not adapted to long dispersal distances. We want to minimize barriers to dispersal. We want to minimize distance between areas of good habitat. We want to improve the quality of the areas over which that wildlife must disperse. It's critical to their survival. We have an array of tools to protect land. These differ in their level of protection. As I started to say earlier, government ownership is the most effective because it's in perpetuity. There's resources dedicated to the management. But there's many other forms going down to you, an individual with ownership of your land that you can help with actions to improve the passage for wildlife. But I think this is actually a talk for another presentation to go through all these. The point I want to make is that We have many approaches to land and habitat protection, and all of these are necessary. We need to buy up as much good habitat as we can and protect it to perpetuity, but we cannot buy it all. Going back to our lessons from island biogeography, we need as many big islands of habitat as we can get. However, we cannot ignore the condition of the land between the islands. It's my opinion that the poor management of land between our islands of habitat is a large reason for the insect and bird apocalypses we see all around us. If, for example, insects, birds, amphibians, and other animals innocently eat or rest in the yards that have been sprayed for pests, or try to nest in trees and shrubs that would be trimmed with machines, they're likely to die there, poison something else that eats them, or they won't be able to reproduce successfully. It must be like trying to fly across an ocean to a new island. How many succumb to the ocean before ever reaching the island? So, if our objective is to make the areas between habitat islands more hospitable, we have to use all the tools at our disposal. We need to plant more areas that our natural wildlife can safely use, but we need to make sure that we're not just leading the wildlife to their death. We need to work with governments on their policies and regulations to improve land use. This was done very effectively in the Tampa Bay watershed. They were having a lot of trouble with excessive pollution, killing out the submerged aquatic vegetation. They were losing quality habitat. The manatees were suffering. So they limited the use of nutrients and other pesticides, at least on a seasonal basis, in that watershed, and it responded. It cleaned up and it recovered. So minimizing the use of pesticides and fertilizers would go a long way towards making our landscape more wildlife friendly. And I am of the opinion that homeowners associations need to be educated about the possibilities of creating more life in their communities with more wildlife friendly practices. That's a tough one. I got a sister that heads an HOA and she's a tough nut to crack. All right, so finally, I think the Florida Native Plant Society is on the right track, particularly with educating the public about the value of protecting natural areas and using native plants. People I talk to seem to understand the impacts we have on our environment. They just need help seeing what they can do in their own lawns. This group is becoming more and more important as development and habitat fragmentation continues. I'm glad to be a part of such a vibrant and growing chapter, and I look forward to the next year under our new leadership. So thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mary?
I do. What do you recommend we can do as a community to encourage the landscapers to not use Roundup? It's one thing. We have a large entrance into our community, and we have a to use Roundup, and I'm just going to use something different. I don't know. Something better.
Tell you what, we're out of my wheelhouse. Anybody got any answers to that? How do we get our professional landscapers to quit using herbicides broadly and at the wrong periods of time in the wrong places?
The aforementioned homeowners associations, they can pass a rule that prohibits the use of Roundup, and your friend, she'll be on it. She'll be like, right? She's not the crack, but once you crack her and she's with the program, homeowners associations are one place where they will pass a rule.
We are not an HOA, but we are a volunteer community that works with all the non-residents. So this came up last night, so I said I would ask today, because I don't know, I don't have a good answer. The salt and vinegar stuff is not going to work on that larger area, but it does look very nice, but
Very good. I would say that they are working for you under contract.
Yeah.
You can put anything in a contract. You can, limit the, types of chemicals they use, how it's used, where it's applied. I personally, think that Roundup has its uses if it can be applied on spot applications. The problem is when it's broadly distributed, before it rains and it washes off into our waterways before the sun has a chance to break down the chemicals.
It's sprayed on stones to prevent weeds from pumping up through the white gravel stones. So they can
Get rid of the gravel.
No, they paid a lot, and this is before my time, but they paid a lot of money for that, but they will not accept that.
All right, well, I hope that
We gotta come up with a solution.
you'll speak with her if you have any ideas, or at least can commiserate. Although, this is the kind of thing that I would like to see supplied in community centers in our various residential communities, HOAs or otherwise, so that people who know, in fact, one of our blurbs here today talks about how you can use Florida-friendly methods. What are those, and how do people use them? I think that we must be able to gather some resources, and I know that I'm probably volunteering myself. But at any rate, yeah, a lot of people are asking that same question. We ought to come up with an answer and document it and get it out where people can find it.
That would be great, that would be great.
I'm familiar with Lemon Bay Conservancy and People for Trees, and I just wondered, are you familiar with any other conservancy groups here in our area that are looking to acquire land? And
Northport has a strong, what's the one based in Osprey? Who is Saxon?
That's the foundation of the Gulf Coast.
There's some
Conservation
very
Foundation of the Gulf
good
Coast.
conservation efforts, and I wouldn't ignore the big ones, like the Nature Conservancy.
Oh, okay.
I used to work for Nature Conservancy, and I gotta say, I didn't appreciate the value of buying up land, even if you have to buy little bits at a time. Through the course of my career at the Nature Conservancy, I worked on policy. The idea was, if we're trying to protect our rivers and our wetlands and our natural areas, well, the way to get the most bang for your buck for limited staff is work on policies and make sure that, good practices could be used. Well, during that time, our real estate section over here was cranking along, buying up land, transferring it to the state, transferring it to federal ownership and that sort of thing. And I didn't understand until after some years, I looked at the map of one of my favorite rivers, and they had systematically been buying the land along the river and protecting it. And that river is locked up now. It's not going any, it's going to flow free and clean and support the wildlife it should. So that's the Altamaha River in Georgia case. And so Swanee River is another one. Swanee River Water Management District has been buying up the land along the Swanee River for
They've
years.
been trying to do that with Mayaca too.
Yeah.
Mayaca is a great example.
They buy up land anytime they can get it.
And I tell you, it works. You have to be patient. You have to keep working it, but it works. At any rate, so one more question.
I'm concerned about Shamrock Park. I quit biking there because I couldn't stand it because of the heavy burning and mowing.
Okay.
And there are no animals there. There are no turtles, no birds. No nothing. The land is destroyed. And I've lived here for 45 years.
They're trying to recover it with fire. They do have some scrub jay out there. And the scrub jay require a very specific height of the woody vegetation. If they don't burn, that woody vegetation grows too high, and the scrub jays aren't able to use it.
I'm aware of that argument, but there are no woody trees on this area.
It's all woody. Those are shrubs, those are woody, okay.
It's brown. It's burnt brown.
Well, they're mowing where they can't burn. You can imagine the neighbors don't like the smoke, they don't like ash blowing in their pools, they don't like the low visibility of the smoke passing over their land. So when they mow, they're doing the closest thing they can to mimic fires. So it's ecological, it's not just shamrock, that's an accepted management practice in our preserves that are surrounded by development. They're doing the best they can. So they're trying to maintain the mission that, I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this, the mission of the management at Shamrock is to preserve habitat for the scrubjack. Now they're dying out, no question about it, but they're still there.
Last time I was there, they pointed out that the turtles are dying. Animals were getting sick in that area.
I'm afraid reptiles and amphibians around the world are succumbing. So it's just one more case.
Probably Roundup.
Yeah. At any rate, do I have time for one more?
Sure.
I was worried about the impact of anticipated sea level rise.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem, and I believe.
Yeah, we could.
What is the anticipated impact of sea level rise? We've seen the effects of sea level rise in Florida going back a couple of decades, particularly on the Florida, used to call it the armpit of the state, what do you call it? You know, like Cedar Key and all that. Very flat, that groundwater sits right on top of the salt water. And when the salt water comes up, it displaces that fresh water and it stresses the non-salt tolerant trees. I was at school at UF and the dying out of pine trees and palm trees was becoming apparent. The professors from the botany department went out and started studying it, and there was already the impact of saltwater intrusion there from sea level rise. I'm pretty sure that as we walk around our preserves, like the intercoastal waterway, I don't know what I'm pointing. I'm thinking I'm at Shamrock. I'm pointing at the intercoastal waterway. That allows salt water to come into areas that didn't usually have it. So compound those impacts with more sea level rise. Yeah, we're going to see more and more stress of the plants, the non-salt tolerant plants close to the coast. All right, well, thank you very much.
I have a
Now, don't everybody run off. Couple of reminders. Gotta get the gavel here.
last time. You get speedo.
Okay, a couple of reminders. Number one, if you have not signed in, please sign in, because we get credit from the state for everybody who comes. Whether you're a member or not, we get credit from the state and also from Sarasota County. They love these meetings because it's one of the biggest meetings that they have all month. So be sure to sign in to help the county and our FNDS. Number two, if you have forgotten, hint, to sign up for volunteer on Plant Native Day. There are 2 clipboards back there. And there are just, I don't know, looks like only maybe 4 or 5 books back there. If you find one that you want to take home, you know, drop a penny in the jar or something and take it home and get it out of my garage. Now, yes, my husband is applauding at that.
We really need people.
Now, I have a goodie bag for our new president. Come on up here, Ava. Okay. All right, first we have, Robert's rules.
Oh, yes, I've used it the last several years.
Right along the coast.
I have a little yellow shortcut, a little abbreviated version, but.
You think it's probably
Well, now you have the real pen.
Caesar Regal Pill.
Business cards that say Ava Lassiter, President. A book that we expect you to read in bed every night. This is called Guide to the Vascular Plants of Florida.
Light reading.
Actually, it's guaranteed to put her to sleep. And finally, the gavel. Now, Lois Cantwell was our previous president before I was, and when she gave me this gavel, oh dear, she said it had been, sorry, Mom, in her family for generations. And she could not think of a better organization to give it to. And I can't think of a better new president to give it to.
Best. I have become aware of how much Linda has been doing, and I do have to give everybody a little heads up that I am not going to be quite as spectacular as Linda. I hope to be able to kind of carry things along, and we really do need volunteers very much, so anyone that can help. But I'm a little daunted to take this over, but I hope everybody will help me out and be supportive, and I look forward to it, and I can't wait to do this. And so, we'll adjourn for today and see you guys.
I will still be around. I'm membership chair, so I'm going to be back at that table for every meeting. So I'll still see you all again. Thanks for coming today.
And Charlotte, we had talked.
Yes.
You just have to yeah, this is terrible.
Yeah.
my neighbor a couple years ago, cut those pine trees up on the golf course. And then I knew it didn't say that
So we're gonna go to your house now. Let's meet him.
They have first year.
I don't think I got my name on the list of Jan Carter. You can use me for are they still there? Well, if you're, are you picking them up? Going to, someone
You've got a new job.
Yeah, you know, and I'm now having there next Tuesday, because we're going to make and like I said, we're usually there by 8:30 in the office. After they go out, they'll say, so if you wanted to be by here next Tuesday, that'd be great.
That's the other thing I wanted to do. Some of that going out in the jungle,
8:30. I usually come.
I have a